Okay, hello. It's the end of the day. It's been a day. Probably gonna wrap up sorta quick today because I got some other stuff going on. But what got done today? So there was some discussion this morning. What were their discussions? We went over some of the stuff in the discussions this morning. And one of the things that I was chewing on was, okay, so for, I did open up some issues for improving the MC examples. Ooh. Oh no, it's my pull request. I got excited, but it's my own pull request. This is the other thing that I worked on. Well, let me go to the other discussion. So I was thinking about autoresponders. I spent some time looking at the code of what it would take to implement autoresponders. So some kind of either callback or some kind of function or something that could immediately handle certain kinds of messages. So for things like pings or requests for information about the device or the services, I was thinking maybe we don't need tasks for that. Maybe we could just have something that receives the message and then immediately responds or something like that. But there were some downsides to that. And this also goes into things like service discovery, which is another thing that I got asked about recently. So I spent some time thinking about that. So one of the big challenges is that when a message comes in, how it comes in makes things get handled a little differently. So let me look at Ergot base, and really there's what do I want to look at? This net stack. So there's really kind of like a couple ways that a packet can come into the net stack. The four main ways are, there's these, you see this kind of like echoed all over the code base. Oh, hey, Alexandra, you're on vacation. I hope you're enjoying your vacation already. But there's kind of 3 or 4 more main ways that packets come in, and you'll see these method names repeated in a couple different places. One, send raw. So this is like when we receive a packet from an interface. It's a serialized message. We have the header, the raw bytes of the header, and the body, and then these get processed. There's send typed. So this is usually like when you're sending, when the message is originating from this device and you know exactly what type T this is. And so you send a typed message where you give me the header and then a reference to the T. Send borrowed, which is similar to send typed, but it's for non-owned messages, and I won't get into that, but basically send type requires the type is static or owned, and borrowed relaxes that, but generally it means that you can't just copy it because it's borrowed from other things. And then send error is usually only used when you're responding like a some kind of protocol error. So this would be something like if you were sending a NAC, like if I was unhappy with the deserialization or the contents or something like that, you could send back a NAC at the protocol layer. But if we wanted to have handlers, the handlers would sort of actually need to be able to handle all 3 of these, which is what sockets do. Sockets have like a corresponding vtable interface for received, owned, borrowed, raw, and error, that they can express because they need to be able to receive these different kinds of packets. So if I had a callback sort of handler, it would also need to basically duplicate these interfaces of like, hey, what if we get one of these, which means that we'd end up having essentially like, it's not really an array of callbacks, it's an array of vtables, which I didn't love. And the fact that some of this, like this vtable is like already kind of like it uses unsafe trickery. You can see what those functions actually look like here. I don't know if this is particularly visible on stream. My font's not huge. And it's fine. It's unsafe code. It's gnarly. I have it somewhat documented, but like I don't really want to proliferate that. I really want to kind of condense that to the fewest places possible here, because it just means more unsafe code to audit and stuff like that. So don't love that. So I don't know. I'm not in love with the idea of callback style handlers. It seemed exciting at first, but then it met reality, and I don't love that. Also, I can imagine most people are going to want to have some kind of context or something like that, which I don't know how I would plumb all that through. So I'm less in love with that. One idea would be to have, the status quo is just provide a handler task for this. So this is what I started working on in this pull request. This is like in the well-known, so I could just have handlers where I can say, instead of making everyone copy and paste this, I could have a pull request. Well, I'm going to open the pull request where I started doing this. And it's nice because we can see that in like 7 different places, I just added a ping handler. And then I can remove a bunch of code. And, we still need to spawn a task that does this. We could select on all of these, like if someone has a ping server and a name server and a something else, we could select on all these. But I ran into a problem with this, where this was originally written by taking a reference to a net stack, and that's fine, except for that on std examples we don't have a net stack, we have an arc net stack, which I don't love how I've done it. It's basically just like I just duplicated the API between the arc net stack and the net stack, and it's fine, but it's very duck typing-y. It also means that I don't just have a net stack here to call these methods on, which means when I tried to add you can see that all the ones that I've implemented are the no standard ones. And when I started implementing this on the standard ones, it's a different type. And so I don't love the idea of having a ping handler and an arc ping handler for all of this, because this is very gross. So I don't know. I'm in a place where I don't know what I'm going to do now at this point. One of the things there's a couple things that are kind of gross and I don't love, and I need to figure out how to handle it better. One of those is that I have Ergot and Ergot base here. So Ergot base doesn't really know anything about endpoints or topics or anything like that. It generally just contains the logic that's necessary for like routing, with kind of an abstract view of what it means to route a packet. From Ergot base's perspective, keys like the schema hash for these types and stuff like that are just 8-byte arrays of values. So it's just kind of like an 8-byte value, and things like the socket kind is just an 8-bit value, like it's a 1-byte enumeration where I've defined that. And I originally split that up because I was like, well, I'd like to be able to hammer out the routing information, and then if I end up changing my mind of how I do the, like, do I do something postcard RPC influence? Do I do something like this? It seemed reasonable to like separate those layers. But what it's kind of ended up in practice is I have sort of like low-level sockets and high-level sockets, and it means that I have to do a bunch of like gunky macro code to like, I don't know, abstract over this, and that's gross, and I don't love that. It's also made some things, like when I was trying to figure out borrowed sockets, again, it's just levels, and there's enough generics going on that it sucks, kind of. So, yeah, I don't know. I might try and just squish it all out, like, see what happens but that still doesn't solve my, like, arc net stack problem. So, I don't know. This is one of those, at the end of the day, I'm not feeling particularly resourceful, so I'm just going to kind of say all my problems. And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to think about it with fresh eyes and, fresh caffeine and some sleep. And hopefully it will be made clear to me. Or if someone's watching this and you have some ideas. One of the ideas is to maybe have netstack be a trait. And then that way I can have sort of like a static and arc implementer of that. But then it means that all of those are trait methods, may or may not be reasonable to have. Yeah, I don't know. Another way I could do it is I could make the ArcNet stack more explicitly contain a net stack. Although the reason that I didn't do that is because at least right now, a lot of my methods on this take maybe actually I didn't do this. Oh, this is an Ergot base. Maybe I relaxed at an Ergot base and I just never relaxed at an Ergot of all of these were like static methods, like in netstack. All these take static self, which I don't know why I did that. There's some cases where it's nice to have, but I don't know if that's strictly necessary. I might try and see if I can clean that up, because that's a gross thing. Yeah, I don't know. I might do some housekeeping, because it's getting to the point where it's annoying me enough that it's preventing other things from happening. So I might do some... I might try just squishing, like getting rid of Ergot base, basically, or really squishing Ergot into Ergot base, and then renaming Ergot base Ergot, basically. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know what it's getting me right now. Maybe if you have the net stack be a version of itself that's an arc if the stood feature is on. That's an option too. It could not be two types. Like, it could just be one of them just has like an inner and one of them has an arc inner. That's not a terrible idea. Doesn't compiler inline the calls without explicitly adding that attribute? I'm not sure what attribute you mean. Oh, like the inline attribute? Is there somewhere where I have a bunch of inline attributes or something? That was probably in Ergot base net stack. I bet you... I don't know where all those inline calls were. The answer is inside of a crate, the compiler will inline things if it's like only used locally or if it feels like it. If you ever... if that ever goes across crate boundaries, then you need an inline attribute for it to be eligible for inline. If you know where I'm, I mean, I have a lot of inline annotations. Yeah, I have them. They are everywhere. But inline also doesn't say like definitely inline. This basically says like maybe think about inlining ? Inline always is the more aggressive one, but even then, inline always is still a hint to the compiler. It can decide not to. But yeah, if you ever see somewhere where inline doesn't make sense, let me know. It's possible. I just copied and pasted it. Alexandra, it says that basically this makes netstack clonable instead, which sounds nice. The answer is arc netstack is clonable already. So if you see the... I don't know if I have an examples open. In, like, what do I have? Ergot and USB router, maybe? You can see that I just clone the stack. So, like, I actually make this router stack is like an ArcNet stack with the specific profile that I'm using. And I do just clone that. So it is a nice thing. It is a nice thing to have. And if it was just one type, I'm just wondering if that's a little too magic-y. But maybe the slightly magic-y is better than, you know, I don't have a high ground to stand on is what I'm saying. Like, I'm in a position where I don't entirely love the second order outcomes of some of my earlier decisions. So, yeah, we'll see. I don't love that. Another thing that I've done in some places is I've had this netstack handle. This is something that came from the BBQ2 crate, where in a bunch of places I can just say, well, you have a netstack handle, but that also right now is split between base and not base, which, yeah. it's one of those things where it's like a lot of things that help a little bit, but they don't compose super well. Like the net stack handle thing helps at one layer, but it doesn't compose super well. And then having like a net stack arc net stack helps, but it doesn't compose very well. And then yeah, I need something that is this. Maybe I should just go, well, it's a little bit magic. What are you gonna do? And just say when you activate the stood feature, you get what you get. That would probably help in a lot of places. So if I crush down Ergot and Ergot base, and then also make net stack magic in that it's in that it is magically arc, that could be interesting. That's weird though, because I would also, like, if I had a const function new, that would be harder to do. So it'd be weird because you'd have like a non-const fun new in yeah, so like it does make sense that they act differently. Like the root of what I actually want is for stuff like this to work, where I just say, hey, you have a net stack. But it does feel weird to me if I have to like gate, like, oh, when you're not unstood, the new function is const fn, but maybe I just don't call it new. Maybe I call it like new static and then new arc or something like that. And if it's just the constructors that are different, then I could probably swallow that. I probably just wouldn't call the constructor new at that point. And I could probably live with that. That's probably livable. Yeah. That's tempting. I'll think about that. That's one of those ones. That's a good suggestion. Thank you, Alexandra. I'll think about that. That could be something I do. Let me think about that with fresh eyes tomorrow. And maybe I'll just try it and see if it goes well. But that could be something to do when I crush everything. Like if I crush the two crates together and then also crush the arc net stack and net stack. I'd have to see what methods are different there. And yeah, like it wouldn't impl clone in some cases. I'll think about it. It's worth thinking about. Yeah, it's better than having a trait, in my opinion, because I don't love having a trait for it, because then it means, well, I guess the upside of having a trait for it means that instead of having to hold like all these methods, like for example this well-known method, instead of this method, because right now this, one of the things I don't love is that when you want to take a net stack by reference, you need to be generic over the mutex and the profile. Excuse me, the mutex and the profile. One of the other things that I've been pondering is having a version of the stood net stack that works almost totally differently. But I don't know. We'll see if that pans out. For example, instead of having like this intrusive link list where you have to have a raw mutex and all that kind of stuff, you just go, hey, you know what? We're just going to use on stood. We're just going to not use an intrusive link list. We're just going to have like a hash map of sockets, and we're just going to deal with it because that's lovely on stood. But maybe that's still reasonable to have that. But yeah, this is one of those things that like I wish I didn't have to be generic over this everywhere, like the profile and the scope raw mutex. And one way that I attempted to handle that was with the net stack handle stuff. So I have this like trait net stack handle where I kind of like bundle all of my generics together. And then this lets me impl this for both net stack and arc net stack. But yeah. So I think tomorrow what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to crush the net stack, or excuse me, the Ergot base and Ergot, and see if that gets me anything. And then maybe thinking about crushing the arc net stack and the net stack down, and maybe eliminating the net stack handle. I think I'm just gonna move some deck chairs around until it seems reasonable. Cause yeah, Yeah, I don't love it being an enum because that means that I have to dispatch everywhere. It's basically like trying to do a din trait or like a manually implemented din trait. You're not wrong, but I don't know if I love that solution. I don't think you're incorrect, Alexandra, but I do think I don't love that solution. So I'll keep thinking about that. Okay, I think that's about what I have going on. I'm gonna pronounce this totally wrong, but okay, Sunrog has been chatting with me today a bit as well about some ESP32 stuff and yeah. So that's been fun. So I've been doing some chatting. At some point I need to bring back RS-45 support probably, but yeah, I've been waiting for inspiration. It's on my to-do list for the next couple weeks, but I haven't gotten inspired to dig that out. I have a couple other things on the stack before that. I definitely want to try and get the discovery stuff to some minimal extent working. So okay, I'll probably wrap up for today. I appreciate the thoughts. If people have thoughts, go ahead and chime in on the discussions. I'm going to try and make this less complicated, and I think that's good for everyone, because there's a lot with a lot of generics and stuff going on, and it's very reasonable to me, but it's a lot, and it feels like a lot, and I don't know how to do it less. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's always I can always do weird type erasure stuff, but that's a that's a big step. But yeah, okay. I hope everyone has a good night. Feel free to chime in on the discussions. I appreciate all the people hanging out in chat. There won't be a video tomorrow. I'm gonna be back on Friday. So I will see everyone Friday morning, unless someone asks like a really long question that I feel like hopping on and discussing. But otherwise, I'll be back on Friday. So I hope you all have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you then. Okay, have a good night.